Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Historian's Lounge. I'm your host, Guillermo Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. Joining me today is another guest from my podcast series, my second guest for season 2 of the Wandering Quill. Joining me is fellow historian, author, and owner of Montford Point Publishing, my good friend, Courtney Atkins. Courtney, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I think little snafu, I think your camera went out.
Sorry about that. There you
go. Okay, there we go. So, Courtney, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so very much. So, for a refresher for those who may not remember season 2 or are now just seeing this for the very first time, what can you tell us about your background?
Okay, just real quick. I'm originally from Mississippi. I moved to Maryland in 2003. I have a degree in general studies, but I have a master's in military history with a emphasis or concentration rather in World War II. I've kind of taken what I'm doing now is I'm kind of taking that a little further, and I'm actually trying to be more specialized when it comes to African American military history, not just World War II but other wars as well, all the way up until now basically. So so that's kind of what I'm doing with that as well. But at the end of the day, I'm still overall a military historian, so I'm not discounting any other parts of military history. I'm always going to be interested in anything that comes down the pipe military history, but I have my areas of specialties that I'm trying to tap into. Like I said, World War II and African American military history.
Awesome. And also, if I'm not mistaken, you are now also a teacher now. You're now going to be teaching, correct?
Yes. Teaching 5th grade literacy and social studies, and that's going good. That's going well as well. Taking a lot of my time, to be honest with you. I'm away from my business and my magazine and things like that. But thankfully for days like today, we have a little bit of professional development, so we have a little time to kind of do work on their end, but at the same time, but it still gives me an opportunity to do other things such as this. So I was happy to have the opportunity today.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you on this show, Courtney, because I think this is going to be really, really fascinating. Now, as I said in the beginning, listeners, Courtney is the owner and editor of his own magazine, The Hellfighter, which documents the history of African Americans in United States military history. And Courtney has already had 2 issues come out, the spring and I believe the summer. And now currently, if you see it on LinkedIn, the fall edition will be coming out very soon.
Right.
And that is the topic of today's episode. So let's actually start at the beginning, Courtney. So in your research, when researching this topic, why do you think it doesn't get a lot of historical study and scholarship?
That's a good question. I think there's several reasons why, in my opinion. I think number one, the culture of the time, when a lot of these guys and women were serving, they were serving during a time when their service was marginalized and their service was belittled, and they themselves were belittled, and even if they did something that was great, something that would make headlines, those types of things were put underneath, and taken away from them. It was something that they, in a sense, according to the status quo, they didn't deserve to have. Like I was saying, in one case, there was recently where there was the Air Force, historian at the Air Force museum. He came across a trophy, and he was wondering what this trophy was for. And come to find out that he did his research, that the trophy was actually awarded to the very first version of the Air Force Top Gun program to an African American fighter squadron. As a matter of fact, I think it was shortly at the end of the World War II, and then when this went down, and these guys were actually, were once part of the Tuskegee Airmen, that actually flew in over in World War II. So yeah, I mean, and it's so it's good that people like that are actually finding these things and bringing them to light. But the reason why those things, that's why they're not out there is because people back then, did a good job of hiding that kind of stuff. They did a good job of keeping that information from being put out in public because they felt like it was not something that should be celebrated. So I think that's the main reason why. And I'm just happy that, like I said, for that historian such as that was at the Air Force Museum, historians such as myself, other military historians, are actually finding this stuff and bringing this stuff to light.
I 100% agree. And I actually remember my introduction into this field of military history and this part of just history in general was actually in college. I actually wrote a piece on, actually, so it was a course in an English class, and it was talking about, like forgotten aspects of history. Even though it was an English class, it was about history. Right. And I was trying to find, what groups or what forgotten piece of history can be done. And I initially wanted to do a piece on the Tuskegee Airmen. I come to find out someone already took that piece. And I was like, well, I'm already stuck. I don't have anything left to look at. But then I found, wait a minute, what's this? And I found that there was actually a group of African Americans in World War I. And I was thinking, how have I not ever heard about this? Come to find out, it was the 369th from New York, more famously known as the Harlem Hellfighters. And I was just blown away. And since writing that, I've been in love with the history of the 369th. And of course, now, many years later, doing research on the Montford Point Marines in World War II, and then also more recently learning about the 761st all-black Tank Battalion during World War II. It's fascinating. It's really interesting. And it just pains me to see, we're now living a time when we should have already known about this, but as you said in the beginning, back then their military service was, just hidden or just completely just thrown under the rug. And in your research, Courtney, what other aspects of a Black military service have you found that have been really interesting or just eye-opening?
I mean, my thing is, I what I enjoy doing is, I haven't gone in a while, but I enjoy going to National Archives. I enjoy going there because it's right around the corner from me, basically here in Maryland. And I enjoy going there, and I enjoy digging through the records and just finding things there. There was a time, a few years back when I just went there I said, hey, just give me this box. And you go through it, and you go through those records, and you take it. And the good thing about that is that because the records are so fragile and they're so important, and they're primary documents. I'm saying in many cases that is the only copy that's out there. So not only are you taking your time, to not destroy the document, but at the same time you use that opportunity to to actually take your time and read through them and actually get an understanding for what you're reading. And sometimes it's I'm reading, I'm like, oh wow, and I make a note of that, or I get a copy if it's possible. I get a copy of that document and I bring it home. And a lot of people, when it comes to military units, a lot of people think of the Buffalo Soldiers, a lot of people think of the 761st, and and all these different units and call all that, which is great. But then you have the units that most people don't know about, which is the other smaller units and things of that nature that have done things in the war as well. Like right now, I'm doing an extensive research into the 92nd Infantry Division right now for a book, for my novel that I'm continuing to write. So I mean that that's something that is really, really fascinating to me. I just enjoy reading that stuff and coming up with different things and saying, wow, this would be nice to put out there and let people know about, even though it's going to be in the form of a novel or something like that. It's still information that is still true because it's, I got it from the horse's mouth itself, with lack of better words, when I go and get those primary documents from archives and places like that. So yeah, I enjoy doing that. I enjoy going in there and finding different things, and then turning around and trying to find some kind of way to bring that information. Like even if it's just like writing a report and putting it in a magazine, something like that. As long as people get to know about that information, that's all. I'm happy.
I 100% agree, and it's actually really interesting because for the person for like the general public who probably may not know about Black service in the United States history, probably the one thing you most likely think of is probably glory about the Massachusetts Regiment during the Civil War, and
54.
most likely the Tuskegee Airmen, because those have been the most popularized. But as you said, there were other units that were prevalent throughout the history of the United States. The Buffalo Soldiers, of course, the 761st Tank Battalion. And if we go back even earlier in United States history, we have the Rhode Island Regiment of the Revolutionary War. And if we look at the British side, you had the Black Brigade and the Ethiopian Regiment, which were prevalent during the American Revolution. And it's interesting that we have all of these documents that acknowledge their existence, but we don't make it known, which is, it's kind of a disservice to them in the sense that we know that they existed, but we're not going to talk about it because honestly, for the general public who like learns of this, they only think of, like, as you said, those two units, the Massachusetts and Tuskegee Airmen, but there was a lot more. And I'm sad that there's not a lot of talk about the other groups.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I like going to archives. That's why I like going to different places like that. That's why I like going online and going into different reading rooms that allow you to actually see digitalized primary documents, because then you get an opportunity to actually dig deep and find out information that is not out there, and then, like I said, then turn around and take an opportunity and put that information out there for others to see. Because, like, I'm gonna be honest with you, there's been times when I have gone to archives and actually opened boxes and looked at information and looked at primary documents, and you will see where like tons of people have come before you and in some cases marked, even though they shouldn't have done this, but marked up the documents and got all kinds of information out of it and stuff. But then there's plenty of times when I open up a box and you could tell based off the condition of the documents that no one has gone into these before. And those are the ones that really excite me, because it's like, okay, now, we're about to we might find something here that no one knows anything about. And then you go through it and then you find out about this unit, or you find out this particular person, in the military and all this kind of stuff. And you may come across a newspaper article or something like that and be like, oh, wow, this is someone who did this or did that, and in many cases, the articles are from like, African-American newspapers during that time period, stuff like that, and that's actually putting that information out there. So it's actually really cool to actually go through those things and find those things, and it's exciting. I enjoy getting those type of boxes, to be honest with you.
That's actually really cool. I'm actually glad you brought up the topic of newspapers, because that actually reminded me of the documentary I saw on the 761st and how Black newspapers in the United States were reporting about the 761st and all their exploits and pretty much what they did. And I also found it interesting how, and this is probably the only term I've heard with this unit, but it would probably apply to a lot of other units or other Black units throughout military history, which is that the 761st was considered a bastard unit in the sense that they weren't tied or part of like one specific group in the Army. They were just used throughout the war with whoever needed them. Now, have you found that term in like other primary sources in your research? And what do you think that term means to Black units in military history?
I wouldn't call them I never came across the term bastard unit personally, but I can understand why that term would probably be used, because if from my studies of them, from my studies of various other units, when I because right now I'm also writing a paper for On Point about tank destroyer battalions during the time, and one of the tank destroyer battalions that I'm writing about, I just recently did our interview recently with an author about that, and the reason I guess the reason why that term was used is because those units, they were attached and detached from so many units, white units throughout the war. You know what I'm saying? So you have that tank destroyer battalion that could be attached to, say, for instance, a infantry unit, for going in, or in many cases, if there's a case where there's no tanks around, or there's not the intelligence saying that they might not encounter some tanks, then they might be attached to an artillery unit to be actually used as artillery, something like that or whatever, just to lob rounds into the enemy and things of that nature. When it comes to the 761st, yeah, they were attached to different units and things of that nature. Now there were some cases where some of those units were actually their performance was so good that they were requested by certain units. Say for instance, I can't come up with the name right now, but that one tank destroyer battalion, there was this one particular unit that actually wanted them the whole time, and actually there were times when they were with them. They was with this one particular white infantry unit, pretty much the whole war. So I mean, there were cases like that where those units were requested and they stayed. But then at the same time, you had the ones who were moved around. Even with the 92nd, doing my research on doing the 92nd right now, there were various regiments of that division that were moved around to different parts of the military, different parts of the army during the Italian campaign. They were detached and attached and detached, things of that nature, throughout, the campaign. So I can understand where that term came from. Like I said, I personally have not come across it, but I can see why. And and honestly, I'm pretty sure a lot of times that term was used because, and they were treated that way, was because a lot of white units did not want to fight with black soldiers. They just, flat out, that was just the case, And when they were attached, they were used for that particular campaign or battle or whatever. And when it was over, they were sent back to their, detached and sent back to their regular units and things of that nature until someone else needed them, whatever. But I can see where that term was used. Like I said, I haven't come across it. But I can see why it was used.
Yeah, and when I first heard about that term, I was like, that's a very interesting term to describe it. But as you said, not a lot at a time, white soldiers did not want to be a part did not want black units in their regiment or groups, so they just sent them out into battle. And when they came back, okay, now you're just going back to your group. And it is very fascinating. And I think another discussion, which I find also fascinating to discuss, is, remembrance and landmarks. Because, at all training camps, and this is going back to 761st because it brought up this discussion, the 761st trained at a camp in Texas, and we know that there's a landmark, or there's a pillar of this is where this fort is. It's a home of the Air Force, or this one unit of the Air Force, but it was also the home of the 761st. But there was no mention of it. There's no documentation or physical representation that they train there, even though we know that they train there. And why do you think even now, after so many years, there's not a lot of physical remembrance of these units? Why do you think that is?
That's a good question. I don't know. If you go to now, there are some military bases that do have markers that actually recognize that the efforts and the sacrifices made by African American troops. Like you go at Fort Bliss, there's actually a statue there. I was just reading about it today, honestly, about there's a statue about a trooper that was part of the Buffalo Soldiers during the 1800s. You look at other places around the country. There was a within the last few years. There's a memorial that was dedicated to the women of the 6888 that recently came out. There's monuments out there, to these soldiers and sailors, airmen, and Marines, things of that nature. You also have ships and things like that that are named after them and stuff like that. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I have seen a growing number of memorials coming up in Europe. Over there.
Yes.
Like I see where you had a memorial, of course, to the World War XI. There's one there in Belgium, and then you have a memorial just recently came out. A good friend of mine that I'm good friends with, military historian Samuel de Court. He was in Italy, in Ramitelli, where the Tuskegee Airmen were located at. There's a really nice memorial they just recently put out there within the past couple of months that he took a whole lot of photographs of. And actually, he wrote an article that's going to be in the next magazine that's coming out this in the end of this week. And his article is going to be in there that he wrote up about it, and as well as the photographs he took. Really nice memorial. And it kind of goes back to during the war when African American soldiers were treated better there than they got better treatment there than they ever had in their whole lives back home in the States. And it seems like a lot of the people in Europe are, they're showing more, in my opinion, a little bit more gratitude than is shown here, However,
Right.
I will admit that you are seeing more memorials here popping up here as well. I just don't think they're popping up as fast enough. And then also, I'm just gonna be honest with you, I don't think they should have been up way before. Like you said, a famous tank unit like the 761st train here, or the 92nd train here, things of that nature, whatever. I think those memorials should have been popped up. They should have popped up, way before now. Like I look at the 6888, their information is just now coming out, and then their memorial recently just came out within the past few years as well. So even though once again, it goes back to what how we started. A lot of their information, a lot of their accolades, a lot of their success on the battlefield has been covered up. And just, or in some cases, let's be honest, it's just erased from history.
Yeah, that is true.
Because you had people. That's why it took so long for some people to get awarded the Medal of Honor in some cases, because even though they did the things they did in battle, and it was documented in some cases, like in the case of the Army captain recently has got the I think it was a captain, if I'm not mistaken, or colonel, maybe a colonel, just recently got the Medal of Honor, if I'm not mistaken, during Vietnam War. He was actually his actions were actually written up, I think, but then they were destroyed, I think, or something. If I'm not mistaken, I think there was some level of destruction that went down with that report or something. Luckily they, like I said, they was able to find other ways to verify and get him what was due to him. It took a long time to do it, but it eventually got there. So yeah, I think that's the main thing there. Is once again, like I said, the information was covered up, a lot of it was destroyed. But now a lot of that stuff is coming to light, and you can also see where as that information is coming to light, such as the 6888, a lot of memorials are starting to come their way as well. So hopefully, as more information come out and more of this information is given to the people, more people realize, hey, something needs to be put out there to show generations to come who these people were and what they did.
I 100% agree, and it's true. And my own research, the black units that were sent in like World War I and World War II were treated better in Europe, especially France, than they were in the United States. And probably the most famous one, at least my research I found, was the 369th, the Harlem Hellfighters. In fact, one of them, I forgot his name, but he was like one of the most famous of the 369th, who, as the records show, was on patrol and was able to single-handedly take down a German unit that was trying to ambush his men. And he took them out single-handedly with his knife and a few grenades and his pistol. And his actions were noted by his fellow soldiers, but he wasn't awarded the Medal of Honor or even the Purple Heart. But the French did award him the highest medal in the French army, which is very, very fascinating. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them stayed. Probably there is some documentation or maybe some records that some units probably stayed in France to probably stay in the military, which they realized were probably going to be better treated here. And that actually made that into a different question. Or do you think they were treated better in France because most European powers were already used to the idea of maybe not fully integrated armies, but different troops from different countries?
No, man, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, that's a good question as well. You talk about, back, like you're saying about Sergeant Johnson, about
That's his name, yes.
and with the incident where he took out all those troops, those fighters and things like that. He was the first to get that medal from the France. Eventually, the rest of the division got it as well, but he was the first one to get it. And actually, he had a special one because not only did he get the medal, but he also got something that was equivalent of like an oak leaf or something like that. I think it was like for extra heroism or something like that. That
Right.
attached to that or something. But when it comes to why they were treated better, to be honest with you, I think I'll be honest with you. Like even today, I just think Europe is just more accepting than America is.
Right.
Because I'm not. I shouldn't be comparing then and now, but of course, I've been to Europe several times, and I just noticed that Europe is just a tad bit more accepting when it comes to people of color than other parts of than here in the United States. Now, you go to Eastern Europe is a different story because they're not really used to people of color, but
Right.
like Western Europe is like I mean it's just I love it there, to be honest with you. And I think that's just what it was back then. I just think that even though these people in both wars went through a devastating war and their lives were shattered and they lost family members and things of that nature, they were still accepting of people coming over. And I think it also helped more, especially like say for instance in England when African American troops were stationed there. I think it helped also even more the fact that not only were they accepting, but they're even more accepting of the fact that these black soldiers decided, or not decided, but came over and were willing to be there to help to defend their land, even though, it's not their land, but they were still there. And there was cases where I know for sure where white people in England, got upset when he found out black troops were not allowed to go into certain pubs and things like that, or whatever. They stood up for those black troops. They really did. I came across many, reports and documents that, talked about that, and I just think that overall they were just more accepting, of people of color there, and just like today, Europe and my West, especially in general, is just more accepting, in my opinion. I just see that, and I think that's carrying over to a lot of people that that today. Now, is there racism there? Yes. I mean, of course, you still have you still have racism then, but I just think overall they're more accepting, and I think that's the reason why black soldiers were accepted there. They were just more accepting of them. And also, let's be honest, I say like for instance, like the 369, they brought over something they never heard before with jazz, things of that nature. So
yeah, that's true.
Hey, you know what I'm saying? Like, hey, this is, I like this, you know what I'm saying? So
right.
You bring something like that over there, that's also going to be something that can, attract people to you as well. So I think that's the reason why.
That is true. That is like a very, very, very fascinating discussion. And it then ties into like the history and just like the records of them. Now I've heard the term going back to 369th as like the torchbearers of democracy. In your research, have you come across that term, torchbearers of democracy, or just like the word torchbearer? And what do you think that means for like the general public who may not really understand that term in this context?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna put it to you like this right here. I think that a lot of those soldiers from both wars were in a sense torchbearers. I think it started with World War One, but the soldiers from World War II really, really carried it on, though, in my opinion.
Right.
Because you look at what happened with the civil rights movement, things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? These guys, men and women, went over and fought and won. And you look at their record. The records that are out there. They went over there, they fought, they won, they did what they had to do. They came back heroes, things of that nature. And and in my opinion, yes, you do deserve to get better treatment because of what you did. But I think that even though the soldiers from World War I were torchbearers, I think that when they came back, the climate was just not right for them to really, really carry it forward. You know what I'm saying? To me, racism was still too strong. You got to realize that was kind of one of the reasons why the Klan had its second revival during the 1920s. You know, the main reason why they had a second revival during the 1920s was because of immigration. That was the main reason why. That was the main reason why. But another reason why the Klan had a revival was because you had all these black troops coming back from World War One, all this training. They had weapons. They had the opportunity to go over there and get freedoms that they did not have back at home. And to a lot of the white, you know, people, especially, you know, a lot of the, you know, racist Klan members and things like that. It's like, okay, here they coming back. You know, they come back as quote unquote uppity. You get what I'm saying? You know, they think they can do what they want and things of that nature. You get what I'm saying? So that was another reason why. Like I said, the main reason why the revival happened was because of immigration. But the second reason why they also came about too was because they wanted to keep blacks in their place. And even though they came back with all of these different medals and, you know, accolades and things of that nature and stuff like that, you know. So that's why I said the climate, in my opinion, was not there. World War II is a different story. I mean, you know, they came back from this war, you know, and they fought, and they, they went over there, and, you know, because World War One was fought against, you know, basically what I call just general military aggression. You get what I'm saying? Whereas World War II was a different story. Yeah, you had the military aggression of the Japanese and the Germans and somewhat the Italians. In my opinion, I mean, they were really just propped up by the Germans, to be quite honest with you. But not only were you fighting that military industrial complex from mostly Japan and Germany, but at the same time, you was fighting the racism from Germany. You was fighting against something that if it had a chance to spread, a lot more people, you know, would have died just because of the color of their skin. A lot of more people would have died just because of their disabilities. A lot more people would have died because of the fact that they're homosexual, things of that nature, or they, you know, and so it was more than just, you know, military aggression. It was the fact that you had to put down this evil machine that was bent on destroying that it did what it did not like. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, and these guys went over there and they fought and they did this and everything. And in their minds, not only did they win, they fought and they defeated aggression. They defeated this racism. They defeated some of the best that the Germans had to throw at them. And now, you know, it's time for me to, you know, come home and do the same here. And I think that's the reason why they were able to be more successful is carrying on and fighting for democracy and fighting for freedom and rights here, because they did it over there. You know what I'm saying? And they did it against something that, and I wouldn't say similar to in the States. Don't get me wrong. I'm not comparing the United States to Nazi Germany. I would never do that.
No.
But at the same time, you know, they had racism back here. You know, You had tyranny back here. You had, people that did not like them because of their skin, you know, the color of their skin. You know, so they had to fight against that back here too. So they fought over there, they won, and it was okay. Now we're just going to do the same thing here. That's the reason why you had so many civil rights leaders that came out doing the civil rights movement, like Medgar Evers, you know, that fought in the war. They came back and used those same military skills and tactics, but they used them, in the NAACP to fight, in a suit to fight back against that kind of stuff and get the rights that he and others, rightfully deserve. So yeah, I think it started with World War I. Yes, it really did, but the climate wasn't there. But World War II, those guys who came back from that, carried it on, and they were successful.
I 100% agree, and this is why I love this series. This is why I really love this series. It's just discussion, because this dialogue is just fascinating. Because you're right, the World War I veterans were the torchbearers. They were like the harbingers. They started it, and you're right. The climate wasn't ready for them, but they did lay the groundwork for their successors to take up the mantle. Says like, okay, no, we're not dealing with this again. We're actually going to fight back, because, as you said, in World War I, it was like military aggression. There really wasn't a purpose for the United States to be there in the first place. We were pretty much brought in there because England went getting its butt kicked. It's like, we're running low on manpower. We're running low on ammunition. Send us some men. And the United States military, well, I should say, the American Expedition Force, because it wasn't officially called the United States Military. The United States Military, it was the Expedition Force. But when World War II came about, now you got everybody. You have the Montford Point Marines. You have the Tuskegee Airmen. You have the Flying Tigers. You have the Bushmasters from New Mexico and Arizona. You have the 442nd. You have everybody. Because as you said, when the bombing at Pearl Harbor happened, that affected everybody. Didn't matter who you were. Didn't matter where you came from. You were American. And it was your duty to serve. And that's when they brought everything. And it is fascinating because, again, as we said, World War I laid the groundwork, and World War II polished it, refined it, and pushed it into the 50s and the 60s, which it is a very, very fascinating discussion and overall history. And then I want to also tie it to your magazine, Courtney. So when you created the magazine and talking about, the history of it, were you initially kind of concerned that, many people may not be interested in this topic?
Yeah, I think about that from time to time, to be quite honest with you. But to be honest with you, I don't care. And the reason why is because and the reason why is because it's information that needs to be out there. I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to be racist. I'm far from that. You can never ever call me that. And I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to belittle the accolades and the accomplishments of others in the military. I don't care, white, Hispanic, Asian American, like you said, a 442nd. I would never ever belittle and put African American military history above theirs. I would never do that. I'm not trying to put African American military history above, all of American military history. I'm just not trying to do that. The only thing I'm doing is I'm just pointing out things that was forgotten in many cases about That's all I'm trying to do. That's it. That's all I'm trying to do with my magazine. I'm just trying to put that information out there, let people know that this information is out there. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, when I was coming up in school, I'll be honest, when I was in elementary school, I had this, every time we went to the library, I had this one book that I always checked out. It was a book on Guadalcanal. I don't know why, but for some reason I always checked out that book on Guadalcanal. And I checked out the book, and I would read the book, and I would look through the photographs and things of that nature. And then there were other books I checked out too that was actually in my elementary school library as well. But that was the main book that I checked out. Well, anyway, long story short, I went home one day with that book, and my granddaddy saw it. And he looked at the book and things of that nature, and he said, I was in that war too. Now I'm a little kid now, you know what I'm saying? Even though I'm a young kid, I'm able to pick up on things. But when I looked through the book, I'm gonna be honest with you, I ain't seen no white men in there. That's all I saw. I'm like, white soldier, things of that nature. I'm like, and I'm like, hold on, and I asked him, I said, you was in the war too? He said, yeah, I was in the war. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Black men was in the war? He said, yeah, black men were in the war. And see, that what kind of got me was because, you look through books, you look through different magazines, things of that nature. And, you really don't see photographs of black soldiers. You really don't see many photographs about Asian American soldiers. You don't really see many photographs about Native American soldiers, like the Windtalkers and things of that nature. You don't really see many photographs about, Hispanic soldiers that fought, stuff, whatever, And I'm sitting there like, okay, so, and that made me think when I was a kid then. And my granddad, that's when he started telling me about how he was in the war and how he and his unit, were even though he was a quartermaster unit, they were part of like, if I'm not mistaken, my granddad's unit was a part of was part of Patton's Third Army, and he was a part of the guys who did the Red Ball Express and all that kind of stuff, moving supplies here and there and all that kind of stuff. And then at times, because of the fact that Patton's army was moving so fast from time to time, he was a part of units that were actually detailed to because he was armed with an M1 carbine to actually hold hostage German soldiers from time. And I never forget the one story where he actually he lost a watch, but I still have the band right now. It's actually a German band from a German watch that the German soldier wore. I still have it right now. And he actually took the watch off of a German soldier, had the watch, and he was wearing it for the rest of the war. But then when he was on the transport ship coming back to the United States when the war was over, he lost the watch itself in a gambling game.
Ooh,
but the other soldier that he lost it to let him keep the band that the watch actually fit into. I wish I had time to go get it right now. I mean, what I'm gonna do is I actually post it on LinkedIn. I mean, on LinkedIn, let you guys see it. But it was actually a fascinating story. But the thing that, but what really got me, like I said, was the fact that you had all these black soldiers who were in the war as well. And you look at the beginning of Spike Lee's movie Miracle at St. Helena. You see where that one black the main black character who would later got convicted for killing that guy who was
Right. Yes.
with the Italian partisan that he killed, years in New York. Anyway, you look at the beginning of the movie, he's sitting there in his house. He got all of these, posters and photographs and things of that nature for when he was in the Army during World War II and all this kind of stuff. And he's watching the movie, the one D-Day movie. I can't remember the name right now. The Longest Day.
Longest Day, yes.
Yeah, and he's watching The Longest Day. And as he's watching that, you could see sad. He's actually kind of a mixture of sad, but at the same time angry because, and then he says on his voice, "We were there too." You get what I'm saying? And
right.
It's kind of crazy because you look at some of those movies and things like that, and like on D-Day, black soldiers were there. They were there flying the balloons to keep planes from flying low, to scrape them, all that kind of stuff, whatever. But you don't see that in the movie.
No, you don't.
And so, like I said, I'm not here. My magazine, like the movie, at the beginning of the movie, I'm not here to put down, what other members of the military did. I would never do that. I'm a true patriot when it comes to that. But at the same time, I'm also here to make sure that the history that African Americans, actually, put out there and what they did, that stuff is not erased. And for the stuff that is erased, for the stuff that's like that's not known, I'm here for people to know about it. Bring it to light. Here you go. The information is there for you. If you don't want to read it, that's fine. If you feel like I'm putting down other people, that's fine. But I'm telling you right now, that's not what I'm doing. That's not the aim of this magazine.
Right.
The aim of this magazine is to just bring to light the different accolades and the different successes and the stories that over the years that have been, like I said, either erased or or swept under the rug or whatever.
I 100% agree. And honestly, I absolutely love the Hellfighter magazine. It is a very, very great read. I still look back at the very first
Which I got you a copy too now. I'm forgetting about you.
Oh, don't worry, man. Don't worry. I still love looking back and reading that magazine because it is so, and seeing that and seeing where it is now, there is a growth. It is so good. It's really cool. And listeners, do not worry. I will post a link to Courtney's publishing house where you can buy the first 2 editions. I urge you all to support it. It is a great read. And honestly, it is a very fascinating because I love history magazines. I have a whole collection of them. And I definitely think it is important because it is sad that we don't talk about this as much. And it's important that we do bring it to light. And like, as you said, it's not about taking away the merits of others in history or even military history, but it's bringing to light and placing them in the same pedestal as others in the service who got their recognition or who have fought to get the recognition. And I myself know that too. Being Puerto Rican, you don't hear much about the Boricuaneers who fought in the Korea. But there is a whole story about them. And even for those who don't know about the Bushmasters, those guys are fascinating too, hailed as one of the most dangerous fighters from Arizona and New Mexico. But it's taken a long time to get their story out. And it's very sad that now in like 2023, we don't know about it. I mean, kind of like in the same merit or in the same discussion, only a few years ago we had the Tulsa documentary about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and how Black Wall Street was pretty much destroyed. Yes. And I mean, that was like 2019 or even 2020. That's a long time, but no one knew about it.
Yeah,
no one knew about it. And the history behind Black Wall Street was just fascinating. I mean, the history behind it, I urge everyone to go and research it and check it out because the story behind it is fascinating, as well as, the aftermath and what led to the destruction. It's really, really sad. But ultimately, as you said, Courtney, these stories need to be told because they fill into the gaps of our own history.
Yep.
And it's sad that most people, A, don't want to know about that history, or B, feel that that history shouldn't be discussed.
Right. You know, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I just, my thing is this, I just think that, we live in a country where racism is just too prevalent right now. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just too much of it that's there, and, I just hate that, that some people, no, I'm not saying all people, but there, it's a possibility there may be some people out there who was, will maybe look at my magazine or maybe look at the fact that we, like, I'm gonna be honest with you, I hate it when people say, why are you bringing that back up? That's old history. I hate it when people say stuff like that. And it's like, the reason why, say for instance, like Black Wall Street was the documentary and all that stuff was made was because, number one, it needs to be known about, and number two,
right,
we need to make sure that something like that never happens again. You know what I'm saying? You need to know about those different things. Like, I never forget when I was on, I think I was in high school. No, college. I remember I was in college. This is when I was attending actually HBCU at this time, school called Tougaloo College in Mississippi, Tougaloo, Mississippi, right outside of Jackson, the capital. And I was going to school at the time there, and I was actually watching a documentary about the Klan. And most people understood what I was watching. Don't get me wrong, most people understood. But then I had this one student come by, was like, man, why you want to watch some stuff like that? Why you want to watch this? Blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, because, you need to understand, you need to recognize when this stuff is popping its head up. You have to know when this stuff is coming about. You get what I'm saying? And because, if you don't know, you won't know what to do. Number one, you won't be able to recognize it. And if you can't recognize, you won't have the tools needed to do anything about it. And that's the reason why, that kind of stuff like that come out, and stuff about, Tulsa and things like that. I'm glad those type of things come out, because people need to know about it, and you also need to know what to do if that type of stuff starts happening again. And like in the case of my magazine, people may ask, well, why are you writing about this? Why are you putting this out there and all this kind of stuff? Well, once again, you need to know this history. It's history that needs to be known. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, like I said, I'm not trying to put down anybody's history, but I'm with you. I just think that, the history, what happened with Sergeant York should be on, the pedestal that his history has been put on. Sergeant Johnson's history should be on that same pedestal as well.
Right.
Then they both fought in the same war. They both were on the same side. Of course, Sergeant Johnson was attached to a French unit, but they both, in a sense, did the same thing. To be quite honest with you, Sergeant Johnson actually went a little bit farther. He actually, he was, but the bottom line is that they both were they both in the U.S. military. They both were Americans. They both went to World War I. They both did what they did in combat. They went above the call of duty in what they did, and all that kind of stuff. But for all these years, you hear about Sergeant York. You hear, you got a movie about him and all this kind of stuff. Sergeant Johnson, who's that? You get what I'm saying? I mean, but they both, in my opinion, did the same thing. All my magazine is doing is just putting their stories on the same pedestal and on the same level as everybody else's that you hear about. That's all I'm doing. And that's the purpose of my magazine. And I like how you said, putting it on the same pedestal. That's all I'm doing. I'm not belittling anyone else, but they do need to know about this information.
And as I said, I was going to say, because no one else will. If no one else is going to do it, then I'm going to do it. Yeah. I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk about it. And I'm just going to tell the truth, nothing but the truth. And it is a really amazing story. And I think we got time for like one last discussion before we go into the closing segments.
Sure.
So, Courtney, with everything, with your own research that you've learned from the archives, with creating the magazine and bring about these stories of the forgotten battles, the men and women who served in the armed forces, either in active duty or part of logistics, mailroom, or any other capacity, what do you hope this would do going forward with the discussion of Black men and women in military service and their contributions to United States military history.
Okay. Well, I hope, well, going forward, I really do hope that, number one, that, like I said, people will get to know more about these different accolades and different successes and different sacrifices that African American men and women made, in the defense. I just think that information is important, should be out there, and it should be celebrated. That's the biggest thing. But I'm also going to take, one step further with that and say that I think that it really does. It's something that the younger generations of African Americans can, they can find somebody to look up to. They can, they can read, like for me, once my grandfather told me a lot about told me about his service in World War II and about African American service in World War II. Number one, he became my number one hero. I'm not gonna lie to you. He was always my hero before then. He was my best friend when I was a kid growing up. But when he told me that, I just really, really fell in love with him even more, to be honest with you, because of the fact that he went and did what he did as a soldier. He was just a common soldier. He was a quartermaster, but at the same time, he went over there. He still did what he had to do, despite all of the different odds that were against him. He still went over and served his country well. And he was honored for that when he died, because his funeral was man, it was beautiful. When it came down to the military side of it, and honoring his service that he gave to his, back in World War II. But that was number one. And then once I got to hear his stories, when I went back to the library, not only did I continue to check out that Guadalcanal book, but then I asked the librarian about, what about, books about the Tuskegee Airmen. I told her to ask her that question. What about these guys? This blah blah blah. The difference. The more main military, African American military units that that people know more about, the more mainstream, like I said, Tuskegee Airmen. And now I will admit, I'm a young black man attending a school in the deep Mississippi, South, out in Mississippi, So, some people think, oh, that's not gonna happen. Luckily, that librarian actually went out and got books on African American military history, things of that nature. And before you know it, I had some books on Tuskegee Airmen, things of that nature, And I was reading those books. And honestly, not only did my grandfather became an inspiration for me, but a lot of other African American military personnel that I read about became inspiration for me as well. And that's the reason why growing up I wanted to go in the military so bad. It was not just because of him, and it was not just because of other family members I had that I saw go off and serve, but also because of the people that I read who paved the way for them.
Right.
Saying stuff like that. I was reading about. I never forget one time. I was actually. It's kind of crazy how these stories came about, but I never forget during a family reunion that we had back in Mississippi. I was sitting there and I was reading a book about the Vietnam War and about the Air War. And I never forget, I was actually reading a book about the Air Force Phantom, the famous Air Force Phantom that, the Air Force and the Navy flew during the war, and the Marine Corps, and which was later replaced by the F-16. And so I'm sitting there, I'm reading the book and everything, and I had this one guy came up to me, older guy, he had a beard that's, come up to me and he looked down and he said, I flew that in Vietnam. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I found out that I had a family member who actually flew the F-4 Phantom in the Air Force.
Wow.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, and that fascinated me. And for the rest of the reunion, I was on his coattails, asking like, wow, you did this, you did that, and he went in and talking about how he flew the missions and things of that nature and the combat missions he flew. Yeah, he flew the L-4 Phantom during the Vietnam War, and that fascinated me. And see, that's what I'm saying. That kind of, and stuff like that really, to me, I just think that if people knew about that kind of stuff, saying you had someone to look up to, I think in some cases you would have less crime and things of that nature. I'm just talking about everybody in general. You have less crime, you have less, problems in the communities and things of that nature. And I think honestly, I'm just gonna speak for the African American community. I think that the reason why a lot of problems we have is because a lot of times we don't have anyone positive to look up to sometimes. But if you could go back in history and you look at people like that and have someone positive like that to look up to, that would actually help you to put you on a straight and narrow in many cases. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, it helped me. It helped me on the straight and narrow. I really enjoyed reading those stories and learning about people that came before, because I wanted to do everything in my powers to, to be just like them, if not better.
Right.
And of course, because of a medical issue that the Army found, I couldn't, serve, even though I did 4 years Army ROTC, and I was to the point where I could have got commissioned, but it was fine though. My grandma always said, my mom always said, and my wife always said, it just wasn't in the cards for me. The Lord had better, other plans for me. And
right.
That's why I am now. That's the reason why I write what I write, and I teach what I teach, and I'm doing the magazine. If I can't do it, at least I can do it this way. So yeah. So that's where I'm at with that, so I just think that those stories can be such an inspiration to people. And that's the reason why I want those stories out there. They're inspirational. Really, they are. I mean, they were inspirational to me, and I know they're going to be inspirational for generations to come.
That is beautifully said, Courtney. So beautifully put, and the perfect way to end this amazing discussion, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Historians Lounge. And I'd like to thank my good friend Courtney for joining us. Thank you so much, Courtney. Now, before we officially end today, can you tell us a little bit about any upcoming projects you're working on? Of course, the magazine, the fall edition is coming out soon. Any other projects that we should be looking out for in the near future?
Yes. Like I said, the magazine is still coming about and everything. I'm actually working, like I said, for the 3rd issue. I'm also working on the 4th issue that's going to come out in January. I'm already kind of looking ahead at that, but right now I'm trying to, like I said, we'll be working and everything. I'm kind of a little behind right now with the 3rd, but it's getting along. It's coming along. Hopefully by the end of this week, I should have that publishing out there for everyone to partake of. Like I said, I'm still working on my novel that I'm working on now. It's a novel that actually, like I said, it's actually part of a trilogy that's taking place during the civil rights era. Each novel is going to be centered around a civil rights murder that actually took place, and it has a. Not only are you talking about that, but it also has a pretty decent amount of military history in it as well, because of the main character in the novel. He has a connection to the 92nd Infantry Division of World War II.
Ooh, all right.
So that's actually really cool. Those are my main things right now. Also, like I said, I have a screenplay that's coming. I'm working on as well. Hopefully by the 1st of the year, it'll be ready to go to competitions. That one is actually, again, centered around a. Once again, that's what we talked about earlier. It's actually centered around a elderly Black man who was in World War II, who later became a civil rights leader during the civil rights era. But he's using his status and his influence to help out his son that is actually having a bad time right now, mostly dealing with drugs, and it's actually
okay.
So I'm working on that. So I got 3 different things I'm working on right now in that regard. I got other things I like to work on as well, but for right now, it's just the magazine. I got that, and then I have got the magazine. I got the novel trilogy I'm working on, and at the same time, I got the screenplay that I'm working on as well. So 3 areas of writing I love: magazine writing, novel writing, screenwriting. Can't get
awesome. And let's also don't forget your YouTube channel too. You also launched that as well.
Yes, I got the YouTube channel. Now, I have not worked on, like I said, once again, with me working and everything, I have not done anything.
Right.
But I am working on a little small, not really, a little small. Well, I wouldn't say call it small, but I'm working on a film right now that's detailing Sergeant Johnson and the 369. My plan is to actually come up with different types of. I'm trying to come up with a series of short films that actually details the hero African American personnel who were awarded the Medal of Honor and how they got it. So that's kind of detailing their lives and things of that nature, and goes into their lives a little bit and how they got the medal. Well, what actions they took that led to them being awarded the medal, because you don't win it. It's something that you earn. It's something that is awarded to you. A lot of people say I kind of don't like hearing when people say you win the Medal of Honor. You don't win it. It's something that is awarded to you.
Yes.
It's not a competition. You know, people don't set out to get that. You know, so
Right.
yeah. So so he's the first one I'm writing about right now, and doing a video on now, and hopefully later I'll be doing some more videos. But for right now, I'm trying to finish that up and get that up there. But yeah, that's the main reason for that. You know, the main reason for that is for that. I'm also using that YouTube channel to push the publishing company and books and things of that nature that have been published,
Right.
as well as the magazine as well. So I'm trying to use that as not only, you know, for the videos, but also for promotion for different things that I'm publishing.
Nice. And I'll link all those down below in the description so you can check it out. Courtney's YouTube channel, the link to Montford Point Publishing for not only the Hellfighter magazine, but also if you are an indie author looking to find a great publishing house, Courtney is a great person to look into. And honestly, he's a great guy. I should know. I'm also published with Courtney with a series of short stories, as well as another person on this show, Kim Applegren. I'll link all those down below so you can check it out. Again, thank you, Courtney, for joining us. And thank you all for enjoying this wonderful episode here on the Historians Lounge. And I will see you all very soon. But before I do go, I do want to make one last announcement. My second book, Amunis, Son of Persia, will be officially launching on the 10th of October. So next week, Amunis will be out in both print and ebook. So be on the lookout. I'll post it on my social media on Instagram and LinkedIn. Until then, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out.
Thank you.